Okay, we're good. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm just going to wait a few seconds here just to see if we have some more attendees joining us. It looks like the numbers are climbing steadily. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started, and then hopefully as we move forward, we'll have some more individuals joining us. My name is Lindsay Wortman. I'm the Managing Director at IGI Global, and I've been with the company for roughly 12 years, working my way through the editorial department. I also work with our marketing team quite a bit, a lot of content strategy, so I'm really happy to be with you all today. Whether you are an early career researcher or have been researching in your respective field for years, the pressure to publish is extraordinary, and the academic publishing industry is continually experiencing changes. Over the next hour, we will be covering a number of topics ranging from how to start the publication process to trends such as the open access movement. We will provide a broad industry-level perspective as well as information regarding how our publishing house, IGI Global, is keeping up with the latest progressions in scholarly publishing. As we move through this presentation, please feel free to type in any questions that you may think of, and we will try to answer them at the end of the presentation. If there is a large volume of questions and we're unable to get to all of them, we'll be sure to send a follow-up to all attendees with a full Q&A recap. Also, we are recording today, so should anyone not have been able to join us, or if you just want to go back and recap the presentation, we will have a recording available to you. At this time, I'd like to introduce those who have joined us today. As I mentioned, I'm Lindsay Wortman, Managing Director with IGI Global. Courtney Tyshinsky, Managing Editor for Acquisitions and Book Development. Colby Conway, Managing Editor for Journal Development, is also here, as well as Caitlin Hoover from our Acquisitions team. Our guest speakers today are two of our editors, Dr. Drew Pauly from the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and Dr. Lawrence TOMEI from Robert Morris University. I'd like to talk a little bit about our publishing house, IGI Global. We were established more than 30 years ago. We're headquartered in Hershey, Pennsylvania. We're a leading international academic publisher. We have currently a portfolio that boasts more than 4,000 reference book publications, 175 highly indexed journals that are published both semi-annual and quarterly. We also have video lectures and an extensive line of InfoSci databases. And we are currently recognized by COPE as a full member, which is just part of our commitment to our ethical publication practice. As far as some of the benefits to scholarly publishing, which I'm sure many of you are aware of already, but I'd love to touch on these a little bit. Career advancement and tenure is what we have personally heard and seen as being the #1 reason that an individual will be looking to publish their work. Gaining notability in your respective field of study. Once research has been published, it is widely disseminated worldwide through various channels. This includes aggregated databases, worldwide book jobbers, and subsequently, once that citation impact rises, are indexed then in major indices, which is a huge achievement. Advancement of literature and research in the field, leading to innovation and change, is of course another key element to scholarly publishing. As far as some things to consider when selecting a publisher, these are extremely critical because you want to make sure that you don't somehow enter into what could be a predatory publishing experience. So this is definitely an important list of things to look out for. When selecting a publisher, make sure you're thinking about the following. Does the publisher have an ethics and malpractice statement? Is the publisher recognized by the Committee on Publication Ethics or by any other ethics organizations? Does the publisher have a transparent peer review process with average turnaround times? If you happen to see anything such as a peer review process that only lasts a few days, or that your work will be published in only a matter of a week or two. Those are unreasonable times. That's ridiculously quick turnaround times, and that is not a good thing. Do real ISSNs and ISBNs exist for their publications? Are their publications indexed in credible indices and/or abstracting lists? Any publication fees should really only be for open access and are not expected to be paid until after the peer review has been completed and the article is accepted for publication. The pay to publish model is definitely something to be wary of. There are a number of different format options that a prospective author or editor could choose to work through. At IGI Global, our publication formats are journals, books, and then your paper level submissions. As far as journals, we have semi-annual and quarterly publications. For books, we have edited or authored monographs. And then on a smaller scale, these are unique to IGI Global. We have research insights, which are authored, and research essentials, which are slightly more compact, more accessible research formats. They can range from as little as 6 to roughly 8 or so chapters. Casebooks, handbooks of research, which are our more major reference works, and those can be 20 to 30 plus chapters, 1 to 2 volumes. Encyclopedias, that can be a single volume all the way up to a 10 volume, such as our Encyclopedia of Information Science and Technology. Paper level submissions, we've got book chapters, journal articles, and/or teaching cases. And then as far as our subject coverage goes, we have 11 major subject areas that we focus on, ranging from business and management to engineering, to media and communications, social sciences and humanities. You can see there's a wide range of publication options. With that, we also have several category areas and hundreds of topic areas that our authors and editors will publish in. For editorial opportunities, our opportunities at IGI Global are not unlike other publishers. We do have some sort of more contemporary options as well. We have book authorship and editorship, book series editorship, journal editorship and journal special issue guest editorship, book chapter and journal article authorship, reviewing for books and journals, guest blogging, and hosting webinars and/or video lectures, such as what we're hosting today. Now, Caitlin Hoover from IGI Global's acquisitions team will discuss some of the critical items to think about when formulating a publication proposal, typical proposal criteria, and also how to submit a proposal for consideration to IGI Global. It's going to take a moment just for us to change speakers, so I encourage you to take a look at this slide that's been provided and just some of these key elements, and then she will be with you in just one moment to talk a little bit more about them.
Some things to think about when submitting your proposal. Most academic publishers will request similar information for their proposals. You want to consider things like overall coverage and scope, what the current resources are in this area, and if there is a lack. Is it going to be an authored or edited work? Will there be any necessary permissions that need to be obtained? Will the work be enhanced from a previous work? Is it going to be a collaborative work? Is there going to be a need for copy editing to be done on the work? And what kind of timeline is desired for the completion of the work? Most publishers will have some sort of online publishing form, proposal form. Ours can be found on our website. We have a Publish with IGI Global page, which has information on our service, focus, turnaround, and our ethics. And on this page, there is a link to our submitting a project proposal page. This page has important items that you would need for your project, research areas of interest, as well as links to our journal proposal form, our book proposal form, as well as forms for book chapters and journal articles. Our book proposal form has sections that are going to be similar across most book proposal forms for most academic publishers, including an editor author information area, which also requires the uploading of a CV or resume, tentative titles, indexing keywords, an introduction to the subject area and a synopsis, a tentative table of contents, objectives, a target audience, a plan for reaching contributors, which is for edited books, an area for existing competing titles, a publication format, the projected timeline, and any marketing considerations. And then on our form, you have the option to save and come back to it later, and save and submit. And once a form on our site is submitted, you will receive a confirmation email telling you that it has been submitted. Next, Courtney Tychinsky, Managing Editor of Acquisitions and Book Development, will be speaking about the publishing process and peer review process. Again, it's going to take a minute for her to get ready to start speaking, so you can look over this diagram until she begins.
For IGI Global book or journal editors, your project begins once it is contracted and assigned to a development editor. At this time, you can begin recruiting chapters through various channels. We recommend areas such as listservs, personal contacts, professional associations, conference attendance, and through your editorial advisory board. At this time, book editors will receive and make editorial decisions on chapter proposals. If you choose to accept one, you are essentially inviting that author to submit a full chapter. Once you receive those full chapter submissions, the editor will then assign those chapters to 2 to 3 peer reviewers to complete the double-blind peer review process. We recommend utilizing other chapter authors to also serve as peer reviewers. For journal editors, you will receive the full articles and you will conduct an initial assessment. If you feel the article is valuable, you will then proceed by assigning the paper to members of your editorial review board and associate or managing editors for peer review. Following the peer review process for both books and journals, the editor can choose to reject, conditionally accept, or request further revisions, and the reviewer comments should be made available to the authors so they can make those proper revisions to their papers. Once the revisions are submitted, the editors will make the final decisions on the chapters or articles. Book editors will write their preface and order their accepted chapters, while journal editors will assign 5 to 10 of the accepted articles to their issue. When all articles or chapters are accepted and the papers are assigned to either an issue or their place in the book, the project's editor will inform their development editor that all pieces have been submitted and confirm submission. At this time, book titles are announced to booksellers and scheduled for publication, and CIP data is filed for with the Library of Congress. Now that the editors have confirmed submission, the development editors for the publisher will review the documents to ensure that nothing is missing and all pieces follow the publisher's requirements. This, however, may require that some of the chapters or articles be sent back to the authors for further revisions. Development editors will then send the project, once everything is confirmed by them, to the publisher's production team for typesetting and final proofs. The project's editor will receive a final proof of the entire project, while authors will receive just their chapter or article. Following this phase, the book or issue is then sent to print. On the author level, as a book author, you will begin by submitting your chapter proposal, which is essentially an abstract or a preview of what you plan to cover in your chapter. This will either be rejected or accepted by the editor. If accepted, you will be given a full chapter deadline and you are invited to submit the full version of your paper. Once you submit it, it will undergo the double-blind peer review process, and at this time, you may be requested to serve as a peer reviewer for other submissions. Following the review process, you will be able to view the comments made by the reviewers and given the chance to revise your chapter. While the reviewer comments are valuable, if you feel that any of them detract from the goal of your chapter, you do not have to implement all of the comments, though this may impact the editorial decision. The editor will then make the editorial decision, and the development editor will check your chapter and may request further revisions if it does not follow the publisher's style, figures are poor, or if there are any clarifications needed before sending it to the production department. Once sent to production, you will receive a final proof, and subsequently the entire book will go to print. As a journal author, you will begin by submitting your full article to the editor for initial assessment. Following this assessment, it will be peer reviewed by at least 3 editorial review board members and 1 to 2 associate editors or managing editors. Following this process, everything will go the same as if you were a book author, with submission and proofing. Now I would like to discuss the different types of the peer review process that I've mentioned. The most common types, including the double-blind peer review process, which is what IGI Global follows, is where both the reviewer and the author identities remain anonymous throughout the process. There are also single-blind review process, which keeps the identity of the reviewer anonymous, but the author's name and the affiliation do appear on the paper. Finally, the most common type would also be the open review, where the identities of both the reviewers and the authors are not concealed. There have been a few other methods that have recently evolved, such as transferable reviews, where this is currently being piloted at different publishers. If rejected authors can request that the article, the reviews, and a standard scorecard are transferred to another journal. There's also collaborative reviews. This is a more interactive form of review where the editors and the reviewers would come together and discuss the paper among themselves. Finally, there's also the option for post-publication review. The article is already published online after an editorial check, and then the reviewers are invited to evaluate. Many utilize a commenting system. I would like to go into a little bit further about how IGI Global follows a peer review process. IGI Global is a member of the Committee on Publication Ethics, or COPE, and as mentioned, we do adhere to a double-blind peer review process. For journals, as I've discussed, this starts with the initial assessment done by the editor-in-chief of the journal. He or she will then either reject the article or proceed with a double-blind peer review process. He or she will then assign the article to at least 3 editorial review board members and will assign it to an associate editor or a managing editor for additional comments. Review board members will then answer open-ended questions about the quality of the article, such as its relevance, any areas that are lacking, if the appropriate references are used or could be improved, and any comments to the editor and author. They are also asked to rank aspects of the paper on a 1 to 9 basis, with 1 being extremely poor or unacceptable and 9 being great. Once the reviews are returned, editors can either accept the article, reject it, or return it for further revisions. On the book side, following the chapter submission, the editor will also assign the submission to 2 to 3 peer reviewers. These may be individuals otherwise unrelated to the project or other chapter authors. As with the journal articles, the reviewers will answer open-ended questions about the quality of the chapter, such as its relevance, if the references need to be updated or if they're outdated, and any comments to the editor or author. They will also have that same ranking system. The chapter, like journal article, can then be rejected, accepted, or have revisions requested. Following revisions, the editor may choose to have additional peer reviewers evaluate the chapter. However, the second round is not required. Now that we've given an overview of the process and the reviews, I'd like to discuss how you would go about submitting your work and keeping everything organized. IGI Global utilizes eDitorial Discovery as our online submission manager, though many other publishers may use their own or other common managers such as Scholar One and Editorial Manager. E-editorial discovery allows for all phases of the project to be completed within it, from the project proposal submission as shown earlier, to peer reviews and final chapter or article selection, and the final proofing process. Authors will also be able to submit their chapter proposals, full chapters and articles, as well as any revisions and figures throughout the process. Now, I'd like to give you a little live view of what e-editorial discovery looks like. Within e-editorial discovery, all users are able to access different user guides for both the book side of the system as well as journals. We have options available for editing books and journals, as well as submission guidelines. These would include chapter formatting, things to do for figures, things like that. We also have an area that shows the different editorial opportunities that we've discussed earlier, including how to become a book author or editor, how to become a journal editor-in-chief, submitting a special issue, becoming a reviewer. Then we have the area to submit. These two areas, you would have access to all of the active call for papers for journals, as well as all of the active call for chapters for books. Once you have an account, you would also be able to view all of your current projects in one place. These would be any project proposals you have in process, full books if you are editing any of them, if you are an author on any chapters, if you are a journal EIC, and if you are assigned any reviews. We also, to keep it separate, have an area for completed projects where you would go to view past project proposals, books you've completed, book chapters that have been published, journal articles, anything you have reviewed, everything like that. You can also access those user guides that I had mentioned through the e-editorial user guide system, as well as the IGI Global Publish With page that Caitlin had showed you earlier. From here, I will be sending you back to Lindsay, who will be discussing the author warranty and transfer of copyright.
Okay, hello everyone again. I do want to just make a side note as well that this afternoon we will be sending out a communication across our mailing list that covers this fresher navigation, if you will, that we just introduced on the e-editorial discovery system. So that will be complete with screenshots and also a little bit further description as far as how to utilize some of those new drop-down menus and items of that nature. So if you are on our mailing list, you will likely see that this afternoon. If you're not, then I would definitely encourage you to reach out to one of our contact emails at the end of the presentation requesting to be added to our mailing list, because we would certainly love to have you and be able to send communications out to you on those types of fresh, new, design elements and things of that nature. So we'll talk a little bit about the author warranty and transfer of copyright. I know that this can be kind of a confusing area for a lot of prospective and even current authors and editors. So I definitely want to make sure that we can get into this a little bit more in depth. As far as the author warranty is concerned, IGI Global and other credible publishers only accept wholly original work. The author warranty confirms that the material is wholly original and not previously published nor held under copyright elsewhere. It's also important to keep in mind that the work should not be under review for potential publication anywhere else, as this would be considered a simultaneous submission and would be frowned upon. As far as the copyright portion goes, prior to submitting a final manuscript to a publisher, the author will be requested to assign all rights, title, and interest in and to the manuscript, including ownership of the entire copyright of the manuscript, which is ultimately the verbatim text. Do not fear. It sounds a little intimidating, but it just means that final published paper, word for word, as it stands. The intellectual property is still fully retained by the author. So the research concepts, all of this, these areas that you've been researching for years, they're still your own. It's just the verbatim text that we're talking about, the full article or chapter as is. that will then be held under copyright by the publisher to ensure that it is not further reproduced. And the benefit to an author signing that copyright is that should we, IGI Global discover that another publisher or another researcher in the field has taken large portions of your work and decided to publish it as their own, which would ultimately be plagiarism as well, we can act on that as being a copyright infringement. So it is a benefit to the author as well for them to sign that. As far as open access goes, if the author is publishing under open access, they would only sign that author warranty portion that confirms originality, but they would not need to sign a transfer of copyright since it would be under a Creative Commons license instead. With regard to open access, another item I do want to touch on before I get too much into open access is actually that many publishers will allow the corresponding author of a chapter to sign on all authors' behalf so long as they've been permitted to do so by the other authors. And I wanted to make sure I slid that in because that is something important to remember if you are a corresponding author on a work. So as far as open access goes, for article processing charges, that's a common terminology to describe the publishing fees that are associated with open access. This fee can vary from publisher to publisher and covers the labor hours and costs associated with everything from the development to the formatting, typesetting, printing, e-conversions, online hosting, promotional strategies, you name it, done by the publisher for the final contents. It can be paid by the author or a funding body. At times, the fee may be waived by the publisher. APC funding may come from an individual's institution, grants, a research association they are a member of, or if they choose to, they may even decide to pay it out of their own pocket. When a paper is standard access instead of open, the publication costs are normally offset by the subscription fees, and this is why article processing charges are typically only present for open access publishing. As far as the waivers, which I did just touch on momentarily, many publishers will have their own set of waiver arrangements. At IGI Global, we have a couple different sets of waiver arrangements that we work out with authors and editors. For authors from low and middle income countries, IGI Global automatically waives 100% or 50% of the article processing charge depending on the author's affiliated country. In addition, IGI Global honors article processing charges for all authors if one or more authors are based in a low to middle income country, even if one or more of the co-authors are based in higher income countries. Also, we just recently launched a very special new program where any author whose institution subscribes to IGI Global's InfoSci Journals database, the open access article processing charge will be waived for any IGI Global journal they submit their article to under open access. For any author whose institution subscribes to any of IGI Global's smaller discipline-focused journal databases, the open access article processing charge will be waived for any IGI Global journal within that specific discipline area that they submit their article to under open access. These subscriptions will ultimately then subsidize all publication costs associated with, as I talked about earlier, the development, the formatting, typesetting, printing, online hosting, promotion, and distribution of the final contents. It is important to note that under the ethical standards, that all article processing charge waivers are processed by IGI Global's administrative staff and not the journal's editorial team in order to maintain the integrity of the peer review process. We do kindly ask that authors do not disclose any information regarding article processing charge waivers and discounts to the journal editor-in-chief or the editorial advisory board in order to maintain that integrity. As far as the different types of open access, over the years, there have been quite a number of new open access models that have been introduced. Here, I'm going to touch on gold open access, hybrid open access, and green open access. For gold open access, this allows the author to publish their article in a fully open access journal. The author or funding body pays an article processing charge in order to make the content fully available on the open access journal's website alongside all the articles published within the journal. With this option, the published article is immediately made freely available without any embargo. Under hybrid open access, this allows the author to choose whether to publish their paper open access or as part of the journal's subscription-based content. If the author opts to publish the paper as open access, the author or funding body pays an article processing charge in order to make the paper freely available online alongside the subscription-based content, which would be the standard access content. With this option, the published article is immediately made freely available without any embargo. For green open access, this is a little bit different. This is also known as self-archiving. It can vary from publisher to publisher. So I'll talk a little bit about what we do at IGI Global. So through IGI Global's fair use policy, authors may post the final typeset PDF, which includes the title page, table of contents, and other front materials, and the copyright statement of their chapter or article. This does not include the entire book or journal issue, just the paper, on the author or editor's secure personal website and or their university repository site. However, they cannot post the article, chapter, full book publication, or journal issue on general open access sites for free download and distribution, such as ResearchGate, Archive, academia.edu, SSRN, or society-sponsored sites. So it's more unique to the university repository or the personal website, as I said, that they would be encouraged to post and not some of those other sharing sites. At IGI Global, all of IGI Global's journals operate under a hybrid open access model. When an author submits their paper, they have the option of choosing standard or open access. The paper must go through the full double-blind peer review process and be accepted by the editor-in-chief before the article processing charge will be requested. The author can always change their decision while the paper is in process to standard access if they or a funding body are not able to pay. Once the article processing charge is paid, the paper is released in electronic format immediately. Up next, Colby Conway, Managing Editor of Journal Development and Head of our Journal Indexing Initiatives, is going to talk a little bit about the indexing and abstracting process for both journals and books, as well as how to effectively promote your work. Just take one moment. We're going to go ahead and pass the microphone over to him.
So the aim of indexing is to increase citations of our publications and ultimately enhance the discoverability. For journals, editors, and chiefs, once your journal is indexed within some of the more prestigious indices and abstracting services, you'll likely notice an influx of submissions to your journal. Some of the major indices where IGI Global's publications can be found are Web of Science, Scopus, EI Compendex, and PsycInfo. These indices have very rigid accepted standards with a heavy focus on content evaluation, which continues to make them the most esteemed indices with the most substantial impact factor. And we will touch on the criteria for journal indexing and book indexing in the coming slides. You can also find our publications in other outlets, including Cabell's, Research Papers in Economics, Reference Universe, Ulrich's, InSpec, and Education Resources Information Center, also known as ERIC. And in the past, we've noticed if you have to pay to be indexed or you have to pay for an impact factor, it's often not a reputable website. So some of the main criteria for being included within prominent indices, the first of which is quality content with more research forthcoming. The importance of ongoing research with a solid lineup of future content, which also provides opportunities for new cutting edge submissions in the future. In terms of timeliness, it's important that at least the 3 most recent issues of the journal must be released according to schedule. Also, quantitative citation data with low self-citation rates. The high usage rates among the academic community will showcase the fact that the content is useful and impactful. And besides from just the content itself, the citation record of the contributing authors and the editorial review board members are examined. Diverse authorship is also extremely important, especially if your journal begins with the International Journal of. It's vital that you have international representation among authors and the editorial review board members. And lastly, it's important that the journal has been established for 2 or more years, as this allows the journal to mature, attract readership, and begin to compile those usage statistics. So while attending the Clarivate Analytics Annual Publishers Forum, we learned some of the main reasons for removal from indices. They are as follows: high number of editor-authored articles, lacking authorship diversity and or a diverse review board, regional focus of scope and content, higher than usual self-citation rate at a journal level, but as well as with contributing authors and editorial review board members, few grant-supported articles, and poorly cited authors and editorial board members. It's important to note that inclusion within an index or an abstract isn't guaranteed forever, so it's important to maintain and continuously follow the same criteria that got your journal indexed in the first place. So books follow the typical criteria that journals must follow, in that it must contain timely peer-reviewed content, have quantitative citation data, again with the high usage rate showing that it is useful and impactful, as well as diverse authorship and a diverse review board member list. So in terms of promoting your research, there's many different ways you can go, and this isn't a comprehensive list, but this is some of the more prominent ways to do so. So on IGI Global's website, for each title, there's recommend to librarian forms where you can quickly and efficiently fill out the form and have it sent to your institution's librarian recommending the book or journal. Posting prominent information, including a release or a release of a new issue if you're a journal editor, on Twitter, LinkedIn, or listservs like Irma L are valuable. You can also host a launch at your institution to spread the word of your book or journal to your colleagues. You can create a contact list to whom you would like to reach out, and either you can reach out to them individually or you can have a member from our marketing team do the outreach for you. An engaging promotional tool are editor videos, where you can talk about your title and you can actually have it featured on your book or journal's webpage on the IGI Global website. If you're going to a conference, take a flyer or brochure about your title to spread to the attendees. And then if there's an organization or an association with a similar interest to your research, you can try to partner with them to get your title there. And as always, you can always reach out to our marketing department and they can help in promoting your research, and you can always reach out to them if you have any other ideas as to how you can promote your research. So at this time, I would like to introduce our first guest speaker, Dr. Drew Polly. He is an associate professor in the Department of Reading and Elementary Education at the Cato College of Education at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. So I'm going to pass the microphone over to him, and then he will talk about what he has prepared for this presentation. So Dr. Polly, the floor is yours.
Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to come and share. So my work related to IGI and publishing started when I was a doctoral student at the University of Georgia, and I've just been fortunate and blessed to be able to work on various projects, and IGI has been one of the many frameworks or platforms that I've used to do that. In terms of advancing the slide, I do need help advancing the slide. Someone at IGI. Thank you. So there's a couple different types of projects I want to share with you guys today as you listen in and participate. One is this idea of editing a book around a common interest. So I was actually at a conference almost 10 years ago, and a bunch of us had this common interest in which we were all teaching the same types of courses in the United States and also international, with a focus on basically how technology gets integrated into teacher education programs. And we also were having conversations about the long publication lag from when a journal gets accepted to when it gets printed. So myself and a few other colleagues took it upon ourselves to go ahead and put an edited book proposal into IGI. This was a project that took 11 to 12 months to complete. It was an open call via the website. It was blind peer reviewed, but because we had talked about it at a conference within our organization, and we had spread the word about it, we had a lot of submissions, and we ended up with about a 40% acceptance rate on it. So these edited books will vary in acceptance rate based on how widely and how broadly you solicit, as well as the interest of topic. Next slide, please. So my other type of edited book that I've been part of is dealing with a timely topic. So if you recall what IGI had shared earlier, the timeline for projects varies based on how aggressive you want to be with your writing of the books or the solicitation and processing of chapters for edited books. So in this case, the Common Core, which you may be all familiar with, came out in 2011 and 2012 in multiple states in the United States. So one of the things that I and a few other colleagues had talked about doing at one point was just getting some research papers out about the early implementation. As you know, we had the option, as IGI has shared today, about going to a journal or putting together an edited book. I decided to pursue the edited book idea with a group of colleagues that were on the editorial advisory board just because of the timeliness. So as you see on the slide there, this was a 9-month project, and most high regarded journals in the field that I'm familiar with have between a 12 to 18-month publication lag from when stuff gets accepted to when it gets out. So this 9-month project for me was something that was a priority, in addition to making sure that it was quality. I will say that doing projects like this, you have to figure out in your professional life when you're going to be able to do a lot of the legwork in terms of reviewing, assigning reviewers, and things of that sort. So for me, that work typically happens in the summer. So this actually in April, it's very timely that IGI has this webinar to get the word out for proposals to come in so that you have the summertime when most academics have a little bit of free time or downtime to actually work on publications and things. Next slide, please. So the other one I wanted to talk about was a research handbook, or a handbook of research. This was shared earlier by IGI as one of their larger projects, and I believe this book ended up with 31 chapters in it. We decided to be very broad, focusing on both teacher education, so people not currently teaching but in college, and also current teachers with professional development. A former doctoral student of mine, for her tenure, she actually is in the process of going up for review next fall. She and I had conversations about ways to show leadership and impact, which a lot of academic positions require for tenure. So as a result, we co-collaborated on this. The beauty of this is because the topic was broad, we ended up having representations from 11 different countries and 5 different continents. So as you think about this, whether you are based in the United States or based somewhere else, this is one of those projects we're just proud of because of the international diversity, which we don't see a lot of in publications currently. So I believe that is my last slide. I might have one more. Next slide, please. Oh, and so just to summarize what I've talked about, the idea of ownership of the process, I think, is huge. And that's one of the reasons that I continue to work with IGI with edited books. The control of the timeline. There have been 2 of my 5 edited books in which there were some things going on. So I reached out to them and said, I do need another month extension. So with some negotiation, you have some control of the timeline. And then what I would say about the 4th bullet is the manuscript central system is really easy to use. And so as an editor who is soliciting and collecting proposals and manuscripts, that is very intuitive to use, which is helpful. And then the indexing, which we've already heard. And Google Scholar, I don't know if it was mentioned earlier, but everything that gets published as edited book chapters or edited books also goes in Google Scholar, which is increasing in popularity. So that's all that I have. Thank you again.
All right, thank you, Dr. Polly, for that information. So now I would like to introduce our second guest speaker, Dr. Lawrence TOMEI. Dr. TOMEI is the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs and Professor of Education at Robert Morris University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I am going to pass the mic over to Dr. TOMEI, and he will talk about the information that he has prepared for this webinar today. So Dr. TOMEI, it's all yours.
Good, thank you. You can go ahead and move it to the next slide. I'm sure they're not all that interested in my bio. Okay, there we go. I want to take us in a little bit different direction than what you've heard so far this morning, and talk a little bit about the why part of research and writing papers and doing books and publishing in journals. Here at Robert Morris, and you can go ahead and move it to that second slide. We have adopted the teacher-scholar model, which I hope all of you are familiar with. As the Vice Provost and Professor of Education here at RMU, we have used this model to talk to many of our junior faculty in terms of the expectations that we have if they intend to keep teaching as a vocation in higher ed. I teach at the undergrad, the graduate, and the doctoral level. And at the doctorate level, we actually have a course called Writing for Publication. And so a lot of the information that you saw in earlier slides will come up in a course like that as we help prepare our doctoral students to become scholars. You can see some of the characteristics of the teacher-scholar model here. I won't read them all, except maybe to point out just one or two of them. I think the second bullet is extremely important for those of you that are considering publishing, that you are engaged in professional research. And the whole purpose of this, whether it's publishing in one of the IGI journals, creating books, doing papers, submitting manuscripts, whatever your role as a scholar is going to be, the whole purpose of that in the teacher-scholar model is to kind of flame your passion for what you do with your students. It's your students who should be the recipients of the work that you do. Sure, these books get published, they get purchased, the journals get used as literature reviews, but it's the student who is the ultimate benefactor of what it is that you want to share with your learning community. And so along that line, I think I would say that as an editor-in-chief of one journal for 13 years, and a new journal that's just going to come up, it will first issue in January of 2019. I have seen articles and manuscripts that really demonstrate the passion that the researchers have for students. I've also seen those that do not. They seem to be, publishing in terms of the publisher perish thing, and an editor can spot that right away. And in most of the journals I've known and worked with, I find that the ones I like to accept are the ones that add to the review of the literature, that show practitioners in their professions, and that model lifelong learning for students. And so those key characteristics from this slide, if you will, are maybe tips that you might want to keep in the front of you as you start to write and prepare journals and the research that you're going to do. Another characteristic of a really well-designed manuscript that is submitted for publication is one that allows the teacher-scholar to focus on an area, on a research agenda. I've had numerous people that have sent me manuscripts, and when I read their bio that goes along with it, they come from a whole different area. So what does that tell me as an editor? It tells me that maybe they're looking at my journal as a quick way to publish an article, and it's not something that they're particularly interested in or particularly scholarly in, but they're simply using the journal as a way of getting something published. And I got to tell you, I've had numerous people that have sent articles into journals for consideration, and they're telling me, and I think this has been mentioned already, but I want to just reinforce it. Number one, the timing is critical. You can't send an article in and say, you know what, I'm up for promotion and tenure in the fall, and I need to have this published in the summer. Ain't gonna happen. In a reputable journal like the ones that IGI sponsors, the cycle of a review for reviews, at least in my case, is anywhere from 8 to 10 months. So don't work up something just because you seem to be short in an area of your promotion and tenure folder. The other thing is multiple submissions. With the technology that we have nowadays, we never had this problem 15 years ago. But with the technology that's there nowadays, potential contributors can blast their manuscripts to many people, to many journals, all at the same time. And I've had the case where I've had a manuscript, I've sent it through my editorial review board, it came back as acceptable to publish with some changes. I've asked for those changes, and the editor comes back, or the contributor comes back and says, well, thank you very much, but I'm going to take this off of consideration at this time. Well, we know what's happening. You know, they either got another quicker offer and went in that direction. And when you do that, I guarantee you, I keep the names of those authors in a separate list. And if I ever get another one from them, it's going to be rejected immediately. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And I'll finish this up because I know we are only supposed to take about the other way. Only supposed to take a few minutes here. We talked to our junior faculty about what their obligations are. And specifically, it's important for them to understand that any time they get in reduced teaching load, any time they get rejected to serve on a committee, it's mostly because we are thinking about the effect of time taken away from scholarly work. So for those of you that are junior faculty, don't go volunteering for everything right off the bat. Do your teaching, do your scholarly work. The rest of that stuff will catch up with you in the future. And then the final slide I have is another one that you can look at. And it talks about the challenges to being a teacher scholar. And the number one challenge is time. Wow, that's a surprise. Okay, that you only have so much time to do teaching and so much time to do scholarly work. You need to make that kind of the most important two things that you do as a faculty member. The other things you can look at here at your leisure, but I'd say balance your time and come up with a research agenda. And with that, I'll turn it back to the IGI folks.
Hey, thank you so much, Dr. Polly and Dr. TOMEI, for sharing your experiences and insight with us. I definitely feel that a common theme was with regard to timelines and the ability to balance your work with the timeline set forth by the publisher and also just the reasonable expectations within the scholarly publishing industry. I know that, with regards to publication formats, we talked about it a little bit earlier. And so bearing in mind whether or not you want to work on a smaller authored or edited publication versus a larger encyclopedia or handbook, or whether you want to go down the paper publishing route, definitely taking those things into consideration and how much of your time you're able to dedicate at the moment whenever you go to consider submitting a proposal or submitting a paper for consideration. So we have a few minutes left, and I would very much like to open the floor up for any questions that the attendees may have had. I did see a couple coming through, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull those up. As I mentioned at this point, if there are questions that we do not get to, we are going to have a very extensive document that'll be sent around that has the response to some of those questions, and also we'll elaborate a little bit more about how your work is distributed once published with us, and a little bit more about where you can find information on indexing and all of those things. So we'll definitely make sure you get quite a bit of information to follow. Okay, so looking at some of these questions, and there are quite a few. I know that there were some suggestions with regards to highlighting some of the different stages of the peer review process. I know that workflow chart was probably a little bit difficult to read, that will be something that we'll make sure that we expound upon in our follow-up, and we'll highlight each of those areas and what occurs at that point in time. So we'll make sure that also it's a more legible slide too, so you can really dive into each of those pieces. So thank you for that suggestion. As far as copyright and plagiarism, so we did get a question about shedding a little bit more light on copyright and plagiarism concerns. I can definitely make sure that we follow up further with that, concluding the presentation in our follow-up Q&A. But as far as plagiarism, I mean, something that we as a publisher, you know, when we encounter concerns for plagiarism, some of the areas that we see as a flag is if we're seeing huge portions of verbatim text being pulled from other sources. And also, you know, self-plagiarism is another concern in this industry as well, where an individual is taking large portions of verbatim text from their previously published work, whether it's by the same publisher that they're submitting the work to now or a different publisher. And that's where that copyright concern, you know, can come into play, is that if, you know, there's another publisher that an individual published their work with, yes, you know, it's your work, but at the same time, if you have 3-4 pages of your manuscript are all pulled directly from this previous work that's held under copyright by another publisher, that would absolutely be a concern for us, because that would put IGI Global in a position of copyright infringement. We do encourage editors to, you know, consider using different plagiarism checking software as well. And so it is likely that should a author submit something that a red flag goes up and an editor says, you know what, I think there may be some concerns for plagiarism, they will possibly run that through software. You know, IGI Global will also keep an eye on things and you know, work with the editors and the authors to ensure that there can be a resolution. And we do have an intellectual property and contracts department that will also look into and investigate any concerns for plagiarism and or copyright infringement. There was a question as to whether or not the slides presented today will be downloadable. Yes, we will. As I said, we'll send across the recorded presentation. In addition, we will send out a copy of the PowerPoint as well. So you will have all those slides that you can refer back to. We did have a question about how to become a reviewer. So that publishing page that we talked about earlier, we do have a reviewer application to become a member of the review board for our journals. We can include that in our follow-up to everyone as well. So that would be the procedure you would want to take if you wanted to become most commonly an ad hoc reviewer to start. But then if you show that you are an exemplary reviewer, you could be promoted further to an editorial review board member or even an associate editor or managing editor down the line. As far as becoming a book reviewer, we would just recommend reaching out to our development at igiglobal.com email address, reaching out to our development team, our managing editor for book development, Courtney Tyshinsky, vets many of the reviewers that come through, as well as our executive editorial advisory board. So that's how that board is built. And if you submit to us just your CV, some research areas of interest, and whether or not you're interested in reviewing for our larger authored books or our smaller authored books, we can certainly get you connected then with content that aligns with your interests. Additionally, we're always looking for individuals to provide testimonials and reviews for our post-published work, which we would, of course, give you complimentary access to the publication, and then just tell us what you think. Another question that came through is, should I use British or American English in my work? At IGI Global, and this can vary from publisher to publisher, but we prefer American English. We do, however, if a work is submitted in British English, that is fine. We would just ask that there be consistency. So if you have a book of, say, 10 chapters, and one of those chapters we're noticing a little bit of British English, that there is consistency across that paper in British English, or even that the book itself be represented in British English, but it is preferred to be American English. So we do tell editors to really, if they're seeing a couple chapters come in that are in British English, just try to convert them over to American English, just so that there is consistency across all chapters. Journals, it can be a little bit different, definitely a little bit more leniency with that. If an article happens to come in British English and there's a a issue of 5 to as many as 10 articles if one of those articles happens to be in British versus American. Again, as long as there's consistency across the paper and it doesn't come across oddly to the reader, then that's fine to proceed. Okay, looks like we've got a couple more coming in. So we did get a question about predatory publishing. That, you know, the term has come across before, but there isn't necessarily a good definition. First of all, Dr. Ka's report, IGI Global's president and CEO, gave a wonderful presentation a couple of months back covering predatory publishing, you know, things to look out for, and it really dives into the concept way more in depth. So I would actually love to send across a copy of that presentation to everyone that attended today, because I think that that's really going to get to the root of some of those questions. Predatory publishers are really just individuals that are out just purely to gain a profit. They're not really looking at the quality of the content or looking to ensure that innovation is being achieved. It's really just about, let's turn around this content quickly to make a buck. So as we mentioned, you know, some of those predatory publishers, they'll have these almost a faux conference held in some exotic tropical location, and they're charging an arm and leg for attendees to submit their papers and attend. They have these, you know, turnaround times where there isn't really a real peer review happening, and they're just immediately publishing the work without it being vetted, without providing commentary to the authors and allowing them to revise their work. And it really is contaminating the streams of knowledge. It really is. And it can make it very challenging for libraries and institutions to know, you know, is this quality work, or should I be, you know, questioning this? And that happens more commonly even with open access than it does anywhere else. And it can be absolutely a challenge for everybody, from distributors to publishers to librarians to authors and editors, to be able to decipher what is a true publisher and what is maybe somebody that is questionable. Okay, I'm going to probably try to take about 2 more here. I do see a lot of questions coming in. Okay, so I do see a question about why can't the journals be more standard in their formatting requirements? We authors get a headache trying to figure out the specific standards of each and every journal we wish to submit to. Well, the one thing I will say about IGI Global journals is we do have the editorial policy in and of itself is standard across all of the journals. So the review process that you can expect, the transparent nature of it, all of that is very consistent across. And also the submission formatting guidelines are also very standard across all IGI Global journals. We do have the submission guidelines all listed online, and the editors are requested to pass those out among the authors contributing. I would definitely recommend that if at any point an author is confused by the submission guidelines, or if they feel like the templates are somehow not communicating what exactly they need to do, definitely reach out to your editor, definitely ask questions. And of course, you're always welcome to reach out to our journal development team, because they're happy to walk you through the process as well. But yes, across the industry, I personally have noticed that there are some call for papers and submission guidelines for journals that may be by other publishers or by different associations and societies. And I have seen that there may be different submission guidelines across those journals. But to speak to IGI Global, we do, you know, strive for consistency. It does look like there's a question that I believe Dr. TOMEI or Dr. Polly may be able to speak on. I'm going to actually go ahead and make sure that they can each speak if one of them would like to take the question. And it's okay if we run over on time just a little bit. Okay, actually, I think Dr. Polly may have left. So Dr. TOMEI, I'm going to leave this to you.
I'm still here, but I don't see the question.
Oh, okay. That's all right. I will read it for you. So there's a question that came through that says, is there a difference in the process if the faculty is on a non-tenure track? And from the publisher perspective, obviously for us, you know, whether an individual is on a tenure track or a non-tenure track, the timelines would remain the same. But have you personally observed a difference?
if the question has to do with as an editor, do I review those papers from two different authors differently? The answer is absolutely not. Would value contributions from a non-tenured contributor just as much as as I would a tenured. Now, the timing doesn't make any difference. Now, if you're asking what happens in a college environment, most colleges will perhaps a little more stringent criteria on tenure-track faculty as far as for promotion and tenure. Here at Robert Morris, just one example, C publications. And an A publication has got to be indexed. It's got to be in a journal that has blind reviews, that, well, we're is online, but you're going to get more points for a printed journal. I'm just going to tell you that right off the bat. And you know, our B journals are more things like the faculty member has presented. So it's not just a paper or a topic or a the conference. And C journals, well, you probably know what those are. They are the perhaps the more less reputable journals, the ones that that publish as a result of you got to pay to get them published. So that's how we do it. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much. We have one more question. This will be the last question that we'll take. Dr. Tomei or Dr. Polly, either of you, I'm sure could speak to this, but an individual had asked, is there a model you suggest to increase time efficiency while working with international colleagues? And I think that's a great question because you're talking about time differences, sometimes probably even some language barriers. If you want to shed some light on that.
Is Drew still on, or is this back to me?
Dr. Polly, it does look like he's in and out, but Dr. Tomei, you're welcome to speak to this if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. And I'll tell you what, this would take quite a bit of time for us to discuss. And as it turned out, I think I mentioned when I did a little introduction that I teach a doctoral course called Writing for Publication. And in that course, I offer my students a timeline and the kinds of things that they can do to for the best use of their time. And if it's okay with the inquirer, I will send that model to you to the IGI folks and maybe have it included in the PowerPoint that goes out.
That is wonderful, and we'll be happy to include that as part of our wrap-up notes. Okay, so it looks like we're actually past our time here, but we do have a lot more questions still coming in, so we really thank everyone for posing these questions. We will absolutely make sure that we take the time to really answer these in depth and ensure that each and every attendee receives a copy of those. And as I mentioned, you are all more than welcome to reach out to us directly. So I do want to just, in closing, look at a couple featured publications. I know we're going to be sending some follow-up info to you all about publishing, but these are also some titles that will further expand upon research methods, scholarly communication, the publish or perish pressures, also research and scholarly inquiry. So these are all titles that we would encourage you to look to recommend to your library, as if your library acquires them, then you, your students, other faculty members will all be able to benefit from these, or just consider adding them to your own individual library. And for additional information about publishing, we do have a publishing brochure that covers more in depth some of these areas. You can learn about our authors, editors, publications, and major milestones. You can see here's a link to the brochure. This will be in the PowerPoint we send out, and then also a video about our company. And then here is our contact details. I hope you'll take note. If you're interested in reaching out to our book development or journal development teams, also our acquisitions and our marketing team. Acquisitions can answer with regards to anything dealing with starting the publication process. Book development can talk a little bit about the publishing process and ensure that you're submitting your paper to the correct place, or if you're a current editor, if you have any questions. And then marketing will be able to provide a really in-depth account of where all we're distributing our books to, how to promote your research further, and some other opportunities you can get involved with. So thank you so much for joining us. I apologize for going a little bit over on time, but I really am thrilled to see it. Looks like mostly everybody stayed on board with us the whole time. So I really hope that this was informative. And just look for an email from us within the next couple of days with all of this information, and do not hesitate to reach out to us in the meantime with any questions you may have. And again, thank you, Dr. Pauly and Dr. Tomei.
Hey, Lindsay, would you do me a favor and email me that question so I make sure I answer it correctly?
Absolutely. Happy to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.